Yo, Dragon Ballers, real quick before we get into the video, make sure to check out our new sponsor, Dex Protection, down in the description below. Make sure to use them for all your card gaming protection needs, whether you need sleeves, whether you need binders, whether you need deck boxes, make sure to use them. I'm going to walk you guys through real quick. You have the product drop-down menu here. Let's say I want to go grab some sleeves. It brings you to the sleeve page, and then you have our regular sleeves, because we're not Yu-Gi-Oh! We don't use mini sleeves, we use real size sleeves. So we click on that. We go to buy now. We have our option of all the different colors. I think Dex Protection sleeves are super high quality. I use them. I use their binders to keep my collection. So guys, make sure to check them out in the description. Let's get into the video. Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another discussion video. In today's video, we're talking about the top 10 meta decks in the Anniversary Box 2020 format. We are getting a new side product, which actually comes out today, so make sure to get the cards you need from that set, but it should shake up the meta just a little bit. So I want to talk about my top projections for decks going into the meta with this new product. That being said, guys, if you are new here, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell so you never miss a video. If you guys want to help the channel out, there are tons of links in the description to do so. Check out the Patreon or the Gemmy app if you want your one-on-one coaching with yours truly, as well as your crossword competitive articles. If you guys need sleeves, deck boxes, anything card storage wise, check out Dex. I'm actually wearing the t-shirt right now. Make Dex, not war. It's such a cool t-shirt design. And finally, guys, if you want to buy or pre-order any cards you see in today's video, use my link to TCG Player. All helps out a great deal. That being said, let's get started. So first things first, I want to talk about the newcomers, the new guys to the scene. The main one that I'm sure you guys all are aware of, I talked about it in several videos, the new Agent of Destruction archetype. I think this has yet to be cracked. I think there are definitely two popular ways to play this deck. I posted my version on the Patreon if you guys want to check that out in the description. But basically, my version of AOD is a much more mid-range version, but the deck can definitely be built with like just the Anniversary Box cards and very minimal outside investments, right? You can actually build an entire deck almost by getting probably 2 of the Anniversary Boxes. Now, I don't know if the leader is guaranteed in the box or not. I'm assuming it is not. You probably have to pull it, just like Toa back in the day. But regardless, you get a leader, and you get a playset of all the new AOD stuff just by getting 2 Anniversary Boxes, and you can build pretty much 40 out of the 50 cards of the deck. Now, my version is not the, 40-card AOD version. I'm actually playing more of a mid-range deck, but if you did play the more 40-card AOD version, that's going to be more of an aggro deck. So I didn't want to put this deck in a specific category yet. I didn't want to call it aggro, mid-range, or control, because I don't think the best version of it has been found out. I'm a very, very big fan of the mid-range version, but I am pretty biased towards mid-range. I think that's, you know, one of the best ways to play this game, in my personal opinion. So with that being the case, I don't think the best version's been cracked yet, so I do kind of want to leave it out in the open. As far as other newcomers are concerned, I do want to give a little bit of credit to Frieza Prison. I'm not 100% sold that it's going to be a meta impactor, but I do think out of the Anniversary Box cards, if I were to say like a second archetype that got some really good support out of it, I probably would say Frieza Prison, because the unisons are actually really solid. The negate, actually, the Frieza Prison negate, at first glance seems really bad. It minus 10Ks your opponent's whole board, their leader, but it also minus 10s your leader. And at first glance, that's really, really bad. But if you do play Gotenks Unison of Rage, that minus 10 your leader actually turns into added power, which actually is not too bad. So it is kind of a specific combo, which I don't necessarily think. That's why I'm not sure if it's going to be, you know, a meta impactor or not. But I think out of the Anniversary Box, it's going to be between AOD and possibly Frieza Prison, and maybe even Bojack. I do think the Bojack support is quite good as well, but as far as like Vegito and the little bit of Janemba support we got, I don't think it's going to be enough to bolster them into the competitive scene. Probably going to be some really strong rogue decks, but I don't necessarily know if that's enough to put them into the meta. So with that being said, that was what I want to talk about with the newcomers. Next up, we're talking about mid-range, and this format really seems to be dominated by mid-range. I am super happy about that, by the way, just a little disclaimer there. But anyways, these are the decks that are really dominating most of the format, especially more so Vegito and Zamasu. Gotenks actually is a deck that people more so kind of discredit, kind of push off to the wayside, and I do have to admit, yellow doesn't seem as strong as it has been in the past historically. Like, Raiders Warcry actually has a lot of checks now that just exist in the format. I mean, before that, you know, yellow was really strong and people could sideboard like the Kai that bounces combos back to the opponent's hand. That would pretty much stop your Raiders Warcry plays. But nowadays with like Bardock Tonal Unison, for example, if you're up against green, your opponent has Bardock Tonal Unison, it is very, very hard for Gotenks to play the game, at least with Bardock Raiders Warcry. The Fusion engine as well. Like, some people play the Fusion engine in Gotenks, some people play just, you know, yellow good stuff. The Fusion engine also has its problems, one being consistency, you know, just having to have those fusion pieces. Not the biggest problem in the world, because we are playing Dragon Ball Super, we draw a fistful of cards every turn. But the other problem with that is the Gotenks counterplay falls prey to both the Trunks counterplay and the Frieza Charismatic Villain counterplay. It even has a hard time against the Yellow Mirror, where they're playing the Vegeta, because getting it rest moded is actually pretty bad, because you lose out on the dual attack double strike. So while you do draw 2 cards in the fusion, you generate a big body, it gets answered very easily, so that is kind of problematic. But with all that being said, as much as I'm kind of trashing on Gotenks, one of my favorite leaders of all time, it is still showing up, it is still topping. I think it even won one of the events at Gen Con, if I'm not mistaken. So I think it is a good deck to consider, for as much people are kind of, I guess, reverse hyping it, if you will. So anyways, moving on to Vegito and Zamasu. Essentially the same deck shell, like probably honestly 40 to 35 cards of the main decks here are pretty much the same, but they kind of do different things. They offer mono blue different things. I talked about this in previous videos, where Vegito is much more of a defensive leader. He brings a lot of defense and a lot of reactivity to the mono blue archetype, whereas Zamasu brings a lot of proactivity. You can actually be a little bit more aggressive, because on most turn 2s you're awakening and you're getting that dual attack off pretty much every single turn after you awaken, unless you need the removal. But even then, having the removal key when you're not going to use the dual attack, having that removal option is going to be incredibly powerful. So I do think Zamasu is a little bit ahead in the race versus Vegito, but I do think both are incredibly good mono blue shells. And even blue green Vegito has done some things with, you know, shout out to Eggman making that deck known. So I think these are both, you know, probably the most powerful decks in the format, arguably, but definitely the most powerful mid-range decks in the format. But there's still a ton of time for the format to develop, so it's pretty early to say that, you know, Zamasu and Vegito are the best decks in the format. They might be leading up to this point because they've been doing very well in the tournaments, online at least, but I think there's a lot of room in the format for the best deck to emerge. And when I say best deck, I don't think there's gonna be a tier 0 strategy that comes out of set 10 plus anniversary box. But what I mean is, though, like, you know, what becomes the most popular decks in terms of competitive play right now, it seems to be Zamasu and Vegito. Next up, guys, we're talking about control. You either love it or you hate it, so let's talk about it. So U7 Invoker, honestly really surprised by the lack of U7 Invoker in the format. It's still there, it still pretty much tops most of the events, but honestly this deck was projected to dominate the format, and that just hasn't been happening. Well, why is that? Let's talk about it a little bit. So it seems like the main conditions for the deck are either the Rival Seeker Goku Burn combo or Apex Victory Strike. Now, talking about Victory Strike first, it is very difficult for a lot of decks to answer the Victory Strike. I mean, when it comes down, it just negates all of your battle card skills. So blue, for example, if they wanted to Trunks counterplay it, you just put it back in their hand, you still lose out on all your battle card effects for the next turn, and they can just recast it. So that's not very great. You have the Charismatic Villain, which can't KO it because it's too big. And you do have the Vegeta Prideful Transformation counterplay. That is something that Yellow has going for it. And honestly, Yellow might have some of the best answers to the Victory Strike in general, but they kind of lack answers to the Rival Seeker Burn combo. So that's the other aspect of it. It's very, very difficult to play around both Victory Strike and Burn, because one requires you to stay at high life to play around the burn, the other requires you to kind of rip through your life to get it as a resource, so you don't just get Victory Strike and lose out on value. But with that being said, it seems like U7 Invoker is kind of losing to itself in a way, and what I mean by that is the deck is very fragile, and I kind of think it's more fragile than it's ever been. So it's always been a deck that's had a very low amount of combo power. It just plays a lot of extra cards, it plays a lot of 10k combos, and it really just has to. And Rival Seeker has the added benefit of being a free 10k combo in the Invoker deck, but that's really the last card you want to be comboing, because that's your main playmaker, right? So if you're put in a position where you have to combo that Rival Seeker, you're just not going to be able to burn your opponent as consistently, because that requires you to draw multiple copies of Rival Seeker. You might, you know, charge a copy if you see it early. You might, you know, bottom deck a copy with a Tournament Power Arena if you just don't need it at the time. So that can be a little bit problematic, and I think that's what's going on with Invoker. I think it's going to be a good deck, and I think it's going to be in the meta. I think it's going to continue to top, but I don't think it's as dominant as myself and other people projected it to be at the start of set 10 format. Next up, talking about Sin Shenron, a deck that actually surprised me in the opposite direction, being as dominant as it is. I mean, it has some really high tops, a lot of top 4s. The deck's doing very, very well, and this is a deck that's going to continue to get support. We know it's getting more support in set 11 based on the set 11 trailer. So if you guys are into control, if you guys want a deck that seems to have longevity, definitely pick up Sin Shenron. And what's really cool about Sin Shenron is you don't have to play Great Ape Sand Instincts, you don't have to play Great Ape Bard Operator's Warcry, because this deck has a pretty good hand control matchup inherently, because of the activate main tap 6, play 7 Shadow Dragons from your drop area. Basically, your opponent can grip your hand all they want. They're really not going to be able to kill you before turn 6 because of how defensive you are inherently. And green isn't the most aggressive color in the game. So those two things combined, yellow and Sin Shenron specifically, is going to make it to that late game they want to get to. They're going to tap 6, they're going to get their immense value, and they're going to kind of negate all the things that hand controls try to do to them over the course of the game. So Sin Shenron, definitely in a great position, definitely good against hand control, definitely good for longevity, and honestly kind of cheap. So I'd recommend picking it up if you want to play control, want a kind of long deck that's going to survive for a long time. Next up, guys, we're talking about hand control. Nuke Goku did surprise me. I did not think it would be as good as it was in the beginning of the format. If we go back to the first tournaments of set 10, aka Virginia Beach and the PPG Core TCG online tournaments, Dread Goku did very, very well. Scott Dashie ended up taking it to a first place finish at that Virginia Beach event, but it has kind of fallen off since then, like Gen Con and the tournaments leading up to Gen Con. It did not win any of the tournaments. It didn't do quite as well. It still made the top cut, and that goes to show you that hand control is still a dominant force in the format, but it's not quite as strong as some people might make it out to be. It's not dominating the format by any means. It just has a strong presence, and I wouldn't even say an overly strong presence. I would say it just has a warranted presence, a presence that is pretty much deserved. It's not too strong, it's not too weak, seems to be in a good place. That being said, I do think Last Resort Frieza is going to start making splashes in the format, and it really wasn't making splashes up to this video because it wasn't any of the top cuts leading into this video. But I think it was really missing out on not having those Zarbon tournament pack promos, as well as not having those Meta Cooler Terrifying Horde promos. Now that players are finally starting to get those cards, I do think Green Frieza is going to see a blast in playability because of those promos now being available. Now keep in mind, only select players are going to have them because of kind of what we talked about earlier this week. The promo distribution is a little bit problematic at the moment, so only a few players are going to have the cards necessary to play Frieza, but those players I think will be playing Frieza, and I think they will be succeeding with Frieza in the long run. So I think Frieza is going to kind of rise in the ranks in terms of a control deck in the Dragon Ball Super Set 10 / Anniversary Box 2020 format. So finally, guys, we're going to finish the video up talking about aggro. The aggro slots have shifted up a bit since the last time I did this video. Reboot Gohan, in my opinion, definitely the king of aggro right now. It's just so difficult to deal with leader-based aggression. Getting that triple strike off is still very difficult to deal with, although Yellow does have a great matchup against this because of a card like Release from Evil. Vegex has moved down to aggro from mid-range from my last video on this topic. Vegex just seems to be the deck that still wants to be very fast. Now, it can't possibly be as fast as it once was with the Universe 3 cards, but it's still trying to be an aggro deck, and that it kind of has to do that because Mono Black doesn't have very good counterplays, and it's very hard to be a control / mid-range deck if you don't have counterplays to actually interrupt your opponent's tempo. So that being said, this deck is relying heavily on Bibbidi into like Further Construction Champa, those types of plays to end the game around turn 3, turn 4. And then we do have Kid Goku. Kid Goku / Skillus is making a lot of waves in this format. It is seeing a few tops here and there, and I think it will continue to do so. I mean, there are very few decks that rival Kid Goku in value when you do actually see your one-drop Goku Adventure Begins and start cycling Dragon Ball and start drawing cards. One of the problems it is going to run into, though, is not seeing the one-drop Goku. It's not guaranteed, you know. So in the games you don't see it, it's going to be a very uphill battle, but I do like it as an aggro pick because you have your 30k aggression when the deck goes off, and it is relatively consistent. So when the deck's going off, you have your 30k aggression with the Ox King if you're playing red, and if your opponent tries to deal with those Ox Kings, you just bring them back with Bunny Girl Bulma. That's a really cool combo that's come out for red Skillus, and I think that makes it a pretty good aggro tool. Combine that with all the other red cards that Skillus can play that are pretty aggressive, I think you have the means for a pretty good aggro deck, but I think Reboot Gohan is going to be the king of aggro. I think Vegex is going to do it very well, and I think Goku is going to drag just a little bit behind Vegex in that sense. But anyway, guys, these are my top 10 predictions for the meta with the new Anniversary Box. I want to know what you guys think in the comments below. Let me know your guys' meta predictions. Let me know how right or wrong you think I am. Thanks for watching, guys. I will see you next time.